They had invited humanity with promises of cooperation, with words dressed in diplomacy. But the truth behind the invitation revealed itself like a blade hidden in a velvet sleeve. The Galactic Tribunal Chamber, a coliseum of arrogance where empires postured before one another, was the place chosen to humiliate Earth. Humanity had come with a small delegation, chosen carefully for their calm discipline and their ability to speak in the name of peace. They wore no weapons, carried no threats, only banners of Earth and the steady dignity that came from centuries of struggle and survival. From the moment they entered, whispers followed them. To most of the galaxy, humanity was still a young race, a species that had risen too fast, dared to speak too boldly, and walked into a council where civilizations measured their worth in thousands of years. The alien generals sat high above, armored and decorated, smug in their power. Their voices carried disdain, mocking the delegation for daring to believe that peace was a choice belonging to mortals rather than rulers. They accused Earth of being disruptive, of seeking to upset the balance of power, of pretending to hold values beyond its reach. The human peacekeepers did not answer in kind. They stood silent, unflinching, hands clasped behind their backs. They had been trained to endure words sharper than blades, to embody the restraint of a people who understood war yet still chose peace. Their silence was their statement, their composure a reminder that restraint was not weakness. The generals, frustrated by calmness, moved to spectacle. Without warning, without even the pretense of a fair process, the execution order was announced. The chamber echoed with the decree. Earth's delegates would die as an example of what happens when lesser species overstep their place. The sentence was not hidden. It was performed on the very floor where peace was meant to be spoken. Weapons were drawn. The peacekeepers did not flinch, did not cry out, did not even beg. They had expected hostility, but even they had not expected betrayal so blatant. Still, they stood tall, their final moments lived without surrender. They died with the Earth banner still held in their grasp, their eyes locked on those who killed them, not in fear, but in defiance. The chamber filled with laughter. To the generals, this was entertainment. To the other delegates present, it was a warning cloaked as justice. Earth's symbol of peace was torn down and set aflame, its cloth burning slowly until only ashes remained. The tribunal floor was stained with blood, and those who watched whispered among themselves that humanity would now retreat, cowed and broken, for how could a young species endure such humiliation at the hands of giants? But among the ashes, something else began to spread, an unease that the generals were too blind to notice. A single line spoken softly carried across the chamber, too quiet for most to hear, but clear enough for those near the scene. One of the remaining envoys, not killed but spared to carry the shame home, leaned forward as the fire consumed the banner, and whispered with chilling clarity, "You should not have done that." The words were not shouted. They were not accompanied by threats. They were not part of a grand speech. Yet they carried more weight than the entire tribunal's verdict. For those who caught them, the tone was unmistakable, not grief, not despair, but something colder. It was the voice of a species that had endured centuries of betrayal and violence on its own world, a species that had survived every attempt to break it, and had learned one lesson above all others: when peace is murdered in front of them, they do not bow. The alien generals dismissed the moment. To them, humans were a minor species playing at diplomacy. The blood of a few delegates meant nothing in the scales of galactic politics. But to Earth, those who had been executed were not nameless pawns. They were peacekeepers, men and women who had carried the hope of their entire planet into the heart of the galaxy, only to be struck down without honor. Their deaths would not be measured in silence. Their blood was not spilled into the void. Across the chamber, as laughter echoed, the silence of humanity's surviving envoy was more haunting than any scream could have been. Those who mocked saw weakness. Those who understood history saw something else entirely. For when humanity chooses silence, it is not surrender. It is the quiet before judgment. It is the moment before the storm. And though no one in that hall yet realized it, the storm had already begun. When the images of the executions reached Earth, there was no uproar of rage, no chaotic frenzy, no blind calls for revenge. The footage of burning banners and blood-stained floors spread across every corner of the planet, and for a brief moment the world fell into an eerie stillness. Streets grew quiet, leaders ceased their speeches, and ordinary people sat in silence, watching the fate of their peacekeepers unfold. The silence was not weakness, it was the pause of a predator inhaling before it strikes. The leaders of Earth convened behind closed doors. They knew outrage alone would achieve nothing. To strike blindly against empires that had ruled the stars for millennia would be suicide. What was required was precision, not fury, patience, not noise. The tribunal believed it had humiliated Earth into submission. Instead, it had done the opposite. It had awakened something buried, something most had hoped would never be called upon again. Within the council chamber, voices were hushed as a name resurfaced, not spoken for generations. The protocols for peace had failed, and the protocols for survival had been shattered. Only one remained, the calling of the ancient warrior. It was not the name of an individual, but of a design, a role forged in the crucible of humanity's darkest centuries. In times of desperation, when no diplomacy remained, Earth summoned not an army, not a fleet, but a weapon of living flesh and mind, someone trained in silence, in patience, in the art of turning fear itself into a weapon. The warrior was not a soldier in the traditional sense. They did not march with battalions, nor carry banners into battle. They were the distilled essence of humanity's oldest lessons, cunning born from betrayal, strategy carved from endless wars, relentlessness bred from centuries of survival against extinction. Where others relied on sheer numbers or overwhelming technology, the warrior thrived on something no empire could duplicate: the human capacity to adapt, to endure, and to strike with intelligence sharper than any blade. As the council debated, memories of history were spoken aloud. Humanity had been enslaved, starved, divided, and slaughtered countless times on its own world, yet it had never ceased to rise again. Every empire that sought to erase it had crumbled. Every tyrant who believed they had silenced it was eventually buried beneath its defiance. The tribunal's crime was no different: an execution meant as spectacle, a humiliation meant as final proof of dominance. But history had taught humanity one unshakable truth: those who strike at peacekeepers do not live long enough to enjoy their triumph. Deep beneath Earth's surface, where no broadcast could reach, doors that had remained sealed for generations opened. The warrior's chamber was not decorated with weapons or treasures. It was austere, a place of preparation rather than celebration. The being that stirred within was not a myth but a reality, flesh, blood, and will forged through unbroken lineage of discipline. They opened their eyes as if waking from a dreamless sleep, and in that moment, centuries of human defiance stared outward. The awakening was not marked with fanfare. No crowds celebrated, no parades marched. The people did not even know the warrior had returned. Only the council bore witness, their expressions heavy with both relief and dread. To summon the warrior was never a choice taken lightly. It meant that humanity had accepted war, not as chaos but as necessity. The silence that had gripped the planet shifted subtly into resolve. The tribunal thought Earth lacked the fleets to challenge them, the armies to stand against their might. They were correct: humanity would not match them in numbers. But they were blind to what numbers could not protect against. For while fleets can be tracked, and armies can be measured, fear cannot be calculated, and vengeance cannot be contained once it takes root. The warrior rose, body scarred by training that had broken lesser beings, mind sharpened beyond ordinary comprehension. They asked no questions, offered no speeches, demanded no reassurances. They had been awakened for one purpose only: to remind the galaxy why peace is sacred, and why the cost of destroying it is unbearable. When the chamber sealed once more, the council released only a single statement to the world: Earth remembers. The people understood immediately. Their silence hardened into unity. The galaxy believed Earth would retreat into despair, but instead, humanity had entered a state far more dangerous. In the void of space, alien empires continued their laughter, unaware that their fates had already shifted. They did not yet know that humanity does not declare war in the way others do. Humanity waits, studies, and strikes with inevitability. And the warrior who now walked among them was not coming with the hope of peace. They were coming with the certainty of judgment. The galaxy prepared itself for a show of human desperation, expecting crude fleets and reckless charges. Predictions of humanity's downfall spread across alien broadcasts, their commentators mocking the thought of a young world, challenging civilizations older than Earth's pyramids. Yet days passed with no battles declared, no armies deployed. The silence unsettled those who had grown accustomed to the noisy defiance of lesser races. Silence meant calculation, and calculation was what humanity had perfected. The first strike came not with weapons but with information. Entire communication networks belonging to the generals were hijacked. Secrets buried for decades, proof of corruption, betrayals, and atrocities were broadcast across their own worlds. Populations that had once worshipped them as war heroes now rioted, demanding answers. Armies began to fracture, soldiers questioning whether their loyalty belonged to rulers who had fed them lies. Humanity did not fire a shot, yet whole fleets became paralyzed by doubt. Next came the disappearances. Supply convoys sent to feed the great war machines of the empires never arrived. Scout ships launched to investigate returned empty or not at all. In systems bordering human space, entire patrols vanished into the void, leaving nothing but silence on open channels. Rumors spread of unseen hunters, whispers of human ghosts striking unseen. Panic traveled faster than any weapon. When the first retaliation struck, it was not random. It was precise, deliberate, designed to scar memory. The very plaza where Earth's peacekeepers had been executed was reduced to rubble overnight. No explosions lit the sky, no fleets appeared in orbit. The ground itself shook, structures collapsed, and when the dust cleared, the site stood obliterated, save for a single remnant, the scorched remains of Earth's banner, somehow untouched amid the devastation. The message was undeniable: humanity had not forgotten, and it would not forgive. Generals who had once laughed at the executions began to sleep less. They fortified their estates, doubled their guards, and tried to assure their people that humans could not possibly reach them. Yet each night, the broadcasts returned, silent transmissions carrying the image of a single figure shrouded in shadow. No name, no origin, only a voice that said, "Your war has only begun." The warrior did not march openly. They struck at symbols, dismantling power structures with precision. Propaganda centers crumbled, fueling uprisings. Command outposts went dark. Fleets sent to counterattack found their navigation corrupted, their systems sabotaged before battles could even begin. It was as though humanity fought with invisible hands, dismantling empires piece by piece without presenting a single target to strike. To the common citizens of alien worlds, fear turned into something more dangerous: admiration. They had seen their leaders slaughter Earth's envoys, yet now those same leaders trembled. For the first time, entire populations whispered a forbidden truth: humans were not weak. They were something far worse. They were patient. They were precise. And they were sending a lesson written in the language of inevitability. The generals gathered in private councils, desperate to understand. How could a species with so few fleets unravel their might so quickly? Advisors proposed endless theories, alliances with hidden powers, forbidden technologies, some ancient weapon rediscovered. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. Humanity was not using machines alone. They were wielding fear as a weapon, and fear corrodes empires faster than fire. As each world fell into unrest, the shadow of the warrior spread wider. They did not need to show themselves to dominate the battlefield. Every unexplained collapse, every lost fleet, every whisper in the dark added to the legend. By the time the generals realized they were no longer fighting against soldiers but against the very psychology of their people, it was too late. Their armies no longer trusted them, their citizens no longer obeyed them, and their power slipped like sand through desperate hands. Yet the warrior was not finished. To strike only at structures was not enough. The generals themselves would have to be made examples. Not through quick deaths, but through the same kind of humiliation they had inflicted. Justice would not come swiftly. It would come as a mirror held to their arrogance, so that every empire watching would understand the price of mocking Earth. And so the galaxy entered a new silence, not the silence of indifference but of fear, as it realized the humans were not fighting to win territory. They were fighting to carve a warning into history, a warning that could never be erased. The first general to fall never saw the warrior's face. Their fleet, the pride of an empire, had gathered to demonstrate strength, only to be lured into a void where every star vanished behind fields of interference. At first, they believed it a malfunction. Then came silence, no orders transmitted, no signals received. One by one, ships ceased responding. When the general finally realized they were alone, the darkness split open with wreckage. Their entire armada had been reduced to floating husks without a single human ship in sight. Panic consumed them, but there was no time to flee. The general's flagship systems collapsed, life support failed, and they were left gasping in the cold of their own arrogance until the final broadcast reached their soldiers, the warrior's voice saying, "This is your judgment." Another general attempted to retreat to their homeworld, a planet fortified beyond measure. They believed no invader could reach them. Yet when they arrived, they found not armies, but silence. Entire cities had surrendered without a fight. Their own citizens lined the streets, not cheering their return but staring with contempt, for humanity had already spoken to them. Broadcasts revealed the executions in detail, forcing the people to see the dishonor committed in their name. The general, once revered, was dragged before their own troops, condemned not by human hands but by the voices of their own kind. The warrior did not need to kill them, their people did. The third general thought themselves clever, setting a trap, baiting humanity with the promise of easy victory. They filled the system with mines, hidden fleets, and layers of deception. But when the moment came, nothing happened. Hours passed, then days, with no human fleet entering their territory. Confidence turned into mockery, until the general realized that their trap had become a prison. Every supply route leading in or out was cut. No reinforcements arrived. No trade passed. Their soldiers starved, morale collapsed, and systems shut down. By the time the warrior finally arrived, there was no resistance. The general begged for terms, but only one answer was given. Mercy was buried with our peacekeepers. Each death, each humiliation, spread across the stars faster than any weapon could travel. The galaxy watched generals who had once strutted as untouchable conquerors reduced to shadows of themselves. None died with honor. None were given swift endings. Humanity ensured their falls were public, undeniable, and unforgettable. Where the executions of Earth's peacekeepers had been meant to inspire fear of humans, the executions of alien generals inspired fear of defying them. The surviving generals tried to rally, but their unity shattered. Distrust poisoned every word between them. Each believed they might be the next target. They abandoned campaigns, withdrew fleets, and fortified their personal estates. But even behind walls of steel and legions of guards, they could not sleep. For every fortress has a door, every system a weakness, and the warrior moved with relentless precision. When the fourth general was taken, it was not through fleets or bombardments. Their fortress was untouched, their armies intact, yet when dawn rose on their world, the general was gone. Their body was found days later, suspended above the very tribunal chamber where Earth's peacekeepers had been executed. No blood had been spilled across the floor this time, only the silence of horror, as every delegate stared at the lifeless figure hanging beneath Earth's restored banner. The message was clear: justice does not forget, and it does not forgive. By then, the galaxy no longer questioned humanity's capability. What unsettled them most was the precision of it all. There was no chaos, no excess, no mindless slaughter. Each strike was targeted, each punishment measured, each general destroyed in the same manner they had mocked Earth, with spectacle, with inevitability, with no chance to resist. The lesson could not be ignored. Earth did not conquer for territory, nor did it fight for glory. It fought for remembrance. When the last of the generals was cornered, stripped of fleets, abandoned by allies, and hated by their own people, they tried one final plea. They begged to be spared, promising alliance, promising reparations, promising anything that might preserve their life. But the warrior's reply was cold and final. Peacekeepers asked for peace. You gave them death. Now you will join them. And with that, the last execution was complete. Across the galaxy, fear solidified into law. No empire, no council, no ruler could ignore what had been shown. To kill humans under a banner of peace was to invite annihilation, not from armies, but from inevitability. The executions that began as humiliation for Earth had become the downfall of those who committed them. The scales were balanced, and the galaxy would never again look at humanity as weak. The tribunal was summoned again, but this time the air within its chamber was stripped of arrogance. The seats once filled with mocking laughter now carried the weight of silence. Delegates who had applauded the executions dared not meet each other's eyes, for each remembered the images of generals dragged down, their banners burned, their voices silenced by the very judgment they had mocked. None dared to jest when the humans entered. The warrior did not walk with an entourage. They stepped alone, bearing no weapon visible, yet every being in that chamber felt the pressure of their presence. They did not need armies behind them. The galaxy already understood that armies were irrelevant. What stood before them was the embodiment of a lesson written in blood, a reminder that peace was not a plea but a covenant, and breaking it had a price. The chamber waited for demands, for conditions, for conquests declared. Instead, the warriors spoke with a voice steady, measured, undeniable. They reminded the council that Earth had come with peacekeepers, not soldiers, that humanity had extended an open hand rather than a clenched fist. That hand had been severed in front of all, mocked, set aflame. The response had been chosen not by Earth but by those who believed peace was weakness. We did not choose war, the warrior said. War was forced into our hands when peace was slaughtered before us. They offered no long justification, no dramatic speeches of revenge. They simply stated truth. Humanity would not conquer empires, would not plant flags on alien soil, would not enslave populations. Humanity had no desire for empire. But humanity would never again allow its envoys to be touched without consequence. From this day forward, to strike at a human under the banner of peace would be to forfeit one's own existence. This was not a negotiation. It was law written in fear. Delegates shifted uneasily, knowing it was not an empty threat. They had watched fleets crumble, generals vanish, cities rise in rebellion without a single human army marching across them. They had seen the reach of a species that fought not with endless numbers but with will sharper than any blade. They knew the words spoken now were not threats but promises. The warrior placed a final decree upon the tribunal. The execution plaza, the place where Earth's peacekeepers had been murdered, would never again stand as a symbol of mockery. It would be rebuilt under Earth's flag, not as a monument of conquest but as a reminder. The names of those who died would be carved into its walls, and beneath their names would be etched the truth, that peacekeepers are sacred, and those who break that sanctity will find no corner of the galaxy safe from judgment. The Council, faced with inevitability, accepted. Not out of respect, but out of fear so deep it could not be hidden. Every empire present saw clearly what humanity had become, not rulers, not conquerors, but executioners of arrogance. A species that asked for peace but carried within it the memory of centuries of blood. A people who never forgot an insult, who never allowed humiliation to go unanswered. When the warrior's words ended, no delegate dared respond. No applause, no protest, only silence as the weight of judgment settled upon them all. The warrior turned, leaving without ceremony, disappearing into the shadows from which they had come. They did not remain to gloat. They did not need to. The message was carved deep enough into the galaxy's soul that it would echo for generations. On Earth, the news spread with quiet pride. There were no celebrations, no parades. The people did not cheer the downfall of generals or the fear now surrounding their name. Instead, they stood in silence once more, honoring the peacekeepers who had been slain, knowing their deaths had not been forgotten, knowing their sacrifice had been avenged with precision. In the void between stars, whispers spread across fleets and colonies. Humanity does not beg, humanity does not yield, humanity remembers. The lesson was complete. Where once the galaxy had laughed, now it trembled. and though the warrior returned to the shadows, their presence lingered in every mind, a promise that should peace ever again be defiled, the storm would return without hesitation. Thus the final judgment was sealed, not with conquests but with memory, not with banners of empire but with the warning carved into the stars: Earth had come seeking peace. The galaxy had answered with blood. And humanity, unbroken, had answered in kind,